Could the ACC actually fire or kick out members of their own league as a way to save the conference and keep Florida State, Miami, Clemson, and UNC on board in the league? We're going to talk about just that, what that might look like, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it right after this word from our sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up? Welcome in. My name is Couz, and you have landed yourself on another edition of Couz's Corner. Come in and make yourself comfortable and belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out this shot of top shelf college football content. On tap in today's episode, we are talking again about conference realignment, and we're focusing on the ACC again today in a report that just came out at Mike Farrell Sports that the ACC could potentially kick out some of their members. Now, before we get to that specific article, I'm going to go back to 7 months ago when I did a video right here on this channel talking about how the ACC could potentially rebuild themselves if they lose some of their top members, like the Florida States, the Clemsons, North Carolinas. If they lose some of those top brands, football brands, they could potentially reshape themselves as a top-tier Ivy League-like power conference. And the reason I put that out there, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm just going to play a clip. This is a 3 or 4 minute clip from that episode right here at Couz's Corner from 7 months ago. I'll leave a link to this video. If you want to go back and watch the whole thing once this one's over, I'll leave a link to it in the pinned comment below, and I'll also leave a link to it at the end where you can watch it. But I'm going to play a few minutes to just kind of give you the background of where this information came from, and then I'll tie that into the report that came out today over at Mike Farrell Sports. Now, I want to apologize. The audio quality of this snippet that I'm getting ready to play is not great. It's the reason I put this pop filter on my microphone. There were a little bit of popping noises in my mic early on, but nonetheless, you can still get the gist of it, and it's only 3 or 4 minutes, so I think you can suffer through it. But anyway, let me play this clip for you real quick from 7 months ago right here at Couz's Corner. And I want to start out by telling you about a message I got, a DM I got from someone who had watched some of my conference realignment videos. I received this DM in the summer of 2022. So it was over a year ago now. I didn't run with it because I didn't have enough details and I didn't know enough about it to really run with it. And I didn't want to, start rumors or, put stuff out that didn't make any sense. But what the guy told me, I felt like it was credible because of his background, and I felt like that maybe he was onto something, but yet again, there was not enough information to run with it. And what that was about the potential start of a Power 5 Ivy League type conference. And I'm not going to share this gentleman's name because I'm not sure if he wants me to or not. So out of respect for him, because I don't have his permission to, I'm not. But he's someone who has worked in media and claims to have sources all around, in various cities across the country. And like I said, I hadn't touched this subject until now. And the reason I'm doing it now is because of a tweet that my good friend of the show, Jim Williams. Most of you know Jim Williams. He's worked at ESPN. He's worked at multiple networks, has a lot of connections in the industry. He has his own podcast called Stream On with Jim Williams. He talks about sports betting. He talks about, sports media, a lot of that stuff. I think he does 2 shows a day. Go check his show out. I'll link to it in the description. But Jim's always tweeting out interesting stuff regarding conferences, sports media, and those types of things. Well, today he put out this tweet that I'm going to share with you right here on the screen. And it says, look for the ACC to look into becoming the Ivy League of college sports. Now, what Jim is referring to, and he clarified this in a later post, we already know there's an Ivy League that plays sports, but what he's referring to is a Power 5 conference, or a power conference now, that has a lot of your higher rated academic schools in the same league. It's a conference that wants to put academics first while also being really good at sports. Okay. I know the Big Ten has a lot of good academic institutions too. The Big 12 even has a few, and the SEC has a few. But this would be one conference where almost every member in the league, if not every member in the league, is highly rated academically and meets a certain threshold. And he's saying that the ACC is going to be that conference. And look at the schools he's listed. A lot of them are already in the conference. Some are not. But you look at Boston College, Cal, who just announced they were going to be joining the league, Duke, Georgia Tech, Miami, NC State, Pitt, Stanford, also just joining, Syracuse, South Florida. There's a new one. We'll come back to that in a minute. Syracuse again now. He put Syracuse on here twice by mistake. I haven't gotten a chance to speak with Jim to see what other school he was referring to there, but that is obviously a typo. SMU, UConn, Virginia, and then an asterisk beside Notre Dame because we know Notre Dame's wish is to stay independent in football, but yet be in the ACC in other leagues, or at least in another conference. Right now they're in the ACC. All right, now, to clarify, we found out later on that Jim Williams, when he put Syracuse twice, one of those was supposed to be Tulane. He thinks Tulane will eventually be a member of this league if it would happen. Now, how does that tie in to what we're talking about today? Well, the report that came out today is not exactly like that. It's not that the ACC will just add in some really highly regarded academic institutions from the group of five after they lose Florida State and Clemson. But the report that came out today, and I got to give a shout out to C.W. Lambert, who writes a blog called Inside the Big 12. Got to give a shout out to him for pointing this out on X. But the report that came out today in Mike Farrell Sports talks about the ACC actually kicking out schools like Boston College, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Duke, and others. Those who may not put as much attention as they should on football and may not be bringing in enough revenue. And they're doing this in order to try and save the conference, not to backfill. They're actually trying to keep schools like Florida State, UNC, Miami, and Clemson in the league. They don't want them to leave. We already know that Florida State and Clemson already has lawsuits against the ACC trying to get out. UNC, some of their board of trustees members made some noise last week about wanting to try to get out. But one of the things mentioned in some of those articles last week about UNC was that everything's on the table and they could even reconfigure the ACC. Now, a lot of people glossed over that. I didn't, because I remember doing the episodes about this in the past and hearing from other sources. What would a reconfigured ACC look like? There's been a lot of conjecture about what that could look like. People love to talk about what could happen, right? Not what's actually been reported, but what could happen. Is it possible that the ACC could actually kick out members? Now, there was an article out. It's probably been 1 or maybe even 2 years ago now. There was an article out. I can't remember who wrote it, but they were talking about how Jim Phillips was going around to each conference school, and they were basically taking an inventory or doing an audit, so to speak, of how much are these schools investing in football. Some of you may remember that. Then we hear about reconfiguring the conference. We hear about everything being on the table. One of those articles last week, I think Ross Dellinger wrote this one. There were so many articles out about the UNC and the ACC last week, I can't keep track of all of them. But in one of the articles last week, I think it may have been one of Ross Dellinger's, who's done an absolutely home run job covering all this. He mentioned something about the ACC having what they call a look-in clause in their contract with ESPN, and that Jim Phillips actually mentioned that in an interview after their spring meetings last week in Amelia Island, Florida. Now, in Florida State's lawsuit, they called that look-in an option that the ESPN has to renew their deal after 2027. Jim Phillips called it a look-in, and he said there are reports that said that the ACC is actually talking with ESPN right now about what the future looks like, about the conference makeup and everything. Now, we know there's a clause in the ACC contract, or at least we've heard there's a clause in the ACC contract with ESPN, a composition clause, that says if the league drops below 14 members, that basically ESPN's deal will be redone or will be null and void. Now, is it possible that this look-in has given the ACC an opportunity to go back to ESPN and say, look here, we need to take a look at this composition clause and reevaluate whether or not that's a good idea, because we're on the cusp of losing Florida State and Clemson, our two most valuable brands, potentially even UNC, arguably the third or fourth most valuable brand in the league, we're at risk of losing those schools, which would absolutely devastate them from a profitability and value standpoint. And I'm sure ESPN doesn't want that to happen either. Maybe they go back to ESPN and say, look, let's take a look at this composition clause. Let's utilize this quote look in. Take a look at this composition clause and change it. Or just do away with it altogether, because right now, keeping Florida State and Clemson, it's an absolute must-have. They have to do this right now. It will save the league. It could be the difference in the league surviving or not. So to me, that composition clause, if I'm ESPN and I'm the ACC, I'm trying to get rid of that thing. And then if you do want to kick members out of your league, maybe that's an option. And if you don't have that composition clause in there, you can do that. You can get rid of the Boston Colleges, the Wake Forest, the Dukes, maybe even Cal, Stanford, and SMU, who you just added, if they don't bring enough value. That way, the TV revenue does not have to be shared with as many teams. And you can give a larger share of revenue to those top brands, whether you do it through equal revenue sharing with all the remaining members, or you even give them a bigger piece of the pie, whatever. You don't have as many mouths to feed. Therefore, all the teams in the league are making more money. Now, I'm going to just show you real quick the article I'm talking about over at Mike Farrell Sports. It says, could ACC teams be fired and form an Academy Academic Alliance Conference? That goes back to what I talked about in my video. Momentum is building in the ACC to fire lesser programs to give raises to its marquee brands. Reformation is perhaps the only way for ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips to keep Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina in his league. Thus, cast-off programs may form a quiet but frequently discussed proposed league focused on service academies and strong academic schools. In his regular Friday appearance on the Bill King Show, Pete Cordelli, who, by the way, is a former assistant coach at Notre Dame and other schools and is now I think he's a broadcaster now, but he does an appearance on this Bill King Show every week. He said he revealed his sources are telling him that the ACC is seriously considering the firing of low-revenue programs that are a financial drag on the league in order to free up much-needed cash currently going to those programs. Instead, that newfound revenue would be diverted to the ACC power brands such as Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Miami. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of the article. That's the gist of it right there. It's all being tied together here. You have the ACC potentially kicking out their bottom-tier brands who may not be focusing as much on football per the audit they did a few years ago. You've got that revenue that's going to those programs potentially going to the top-tier programs to keep them from leaving the conference. In order to do that, you might have ESPN and ACC renegotiating this composition clause to where they don't have to have 14 members. It's all tying together, folks. It's all tying together. And you still have the 4 teams that get kicked out, or if it's more than 4, it could be 6, could be 7. They reform a new league that's a more academically focused league, and you'd have schools like Duke, Wake Forest, maybe Virginia, I don't know, Boston College, maybe add the service academies in there. Maybe Stanford and Cal go with them. Maybe SMU goes with them. Maybe you add a Tulane and a USF, and you have a pretty good league. You have a decent league. It's not going to make the $30 million a year that they're making now, but it might make 15 a year, 15 million a year, maybe. You're going to make more than the G5s, but you're not going to make quite as much as the current ACC. But it may not matter because you're not as focused on football potentially, and you don't need to spend that much money. And if you're Stanford, you've got bukus of money. You don't really need, through endowments, you don't really need all this TV revenue money that everybody else needs. So I want you to let me know in the comment section, is this a feasible report here, or do you think it's hogwash? Do you think this is baloney, BS, whatever metaphor you want to come up with? Or do you think this actually has some legs and could actually be feasible? I want to give a shout out right now to my VIP members of this episode, Browns and Beers, PW Riggs, Roy Harrison, and Matthew 1981. If you want to become a paid VIP member here on the channel, all you have to do is hit the join button. If your device may have it right below the video, if it does, hit it. It'll take you right to the 2 levels you can join, pub level or club level. Pick which one you want. If you don't see a join button, go to my channel homepage, hit the join button right beside my profile photo. You can join right there as well. there's a link to my channel homepage in the description box of the video. You can also like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, help me get to my next big number of 10,000. Also want to let you know about my merch store. I have a link to my merch store. I have shirts, coffee mugs, ball caps, hoodies, a lot of products to choose from over there with different designs. Or you can buy trading cards. If you like trading cards, you can get your On It NIL trading cards right now that support your favorite student athletes through NIL and also supports me here on the channel. If you use the link in my description box, I will make a small commission from any sale that happens after you click that link. So you can support your favorite college athletes and your favorite college football YouTuber at the same time. I appreciate you tuning into this episode. Here's the episode I mentioned that I played a clip from earlier if you want to check it out. Have a top shelf day. Q Country Roads.